Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Get Digital with Agile HR, organized by DecodeHR and Organize Agile. Today, we have participants from many countries. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. We are really glad to have you with us. Hi, I'm Annie from DecodeHR. I'm on the tech side of things. I will be the moderator for today. Let me introduce you to today's speakers. Evelyn Chow is the founder of DecodeHR, a strategic HR consulting firm based in Singapore with clients and technology partners from around the world. In 2019, Evelyn launched DCHR.tech to build a vibrant and open community focused on HR tech. She's a thought leader in leadership and digital transformation and shares her knowledge regularly at events, seminars, and local universities. Evelyn is an Agile HR advocate. Next, we have Gidion Peters. He's the founder of Organize Agile in New York, United States, and Amsterdam, the Netherlands. He's a passionate organizational change agent, trainer, and executive coach. He consults at a range of Fortune 500 companies and public organizations. Gideon is also the author of Scrum 2015 and Agile HR 2017 and the initiator of the International State of Agile HR 2020 report. Hi, Evelyn. How has it been for you this week?
Good. We have been busy trying to prepare for the webinar and lots going on, working from home as well. So it's a lot to cope with, but it's been good. And I'm glad for Singapore, we are going back to work tomorrow.
And good morning to you, Gideon.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. And I must say I'm very excited with the list of guests today. I see a lot of people from the Netherlands or Dutch-sounding names, as well as a lot of people from Asia, Turkish participants. So this looks like a jolly group.
Great. All right, let's start with a few housekeeping items before we begin. So you all know all attendees are automatically on mute. There is no need to mute yourself or turn off your sound. This webinar will be recorded to be shared with those unable to attend. All attendees remain anonymous to other attendees, even for the Q&A part. These questions will only be visible to the panelists. There's a Q&A button at the top or bottom of your Zoom panel. You can check for it. It's either at the top or bottom. There's a Q&A button. You may put in your questions as we go through the webinar. Feel free to put them in anytime. We will set aside time at the end of the webinar to answer your questions, but don't wait until the end to put them in. You may choose to be anonymous when submitting your questions. However, we would appreciate if you leave your name, as we may not be able to address all the questions here, so we can follow up with you after. In case you're wondering, the decks shared in this webinar will be sent to you after the webinar. Without further ado, let's start our webinar, Get Digital with Agile HR. Evelyn, over to you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Just want to say thank you to everyone who's joining us today. We have been looking forward to this session. We are thrilled to have participants from all over the world joining us, and it's at odd hours for some of you, so we appreciate that. I think the intent of today's webinar is really to think about how we as a community throughout the world, as HR practitioners or anybody with vested interest in HR, can think about how we, especially during this time of the pandemic, can get agile quickly. And in terms of agile, we're not just talking about being able to adopt technology. I think we are talking about the mindset and how that translates into our people processes. And we usually like to start off the session with just a fun poll for us to warm up, because there will be polls throughout. So I'm going to launch one and just enjoy it. So I ask that you share with us your thoughts, which animal has fingerprints? And we have a couple more polls coming up, but this is really just for us to get used to taking part in the poll. Almost 50% now. All right. And I will stop soon once we hit about 70%. Okay. So this is what we have. And we'll find out the answer later at the end of the webinar. So keep you in suspense. This is a little bit about us, DecodeHR. And one of the areas that we focus on quite a bit is actually on technology in the HR space. And that's under dchr.tech, which we have seen over time that technology is going to be in every part of the organization. And primarily in HR, there are many different domains where technology will add tremendous value. So we are sharing with you this framework that we have developed. And I won't spend too much time on it, but you can see that there are the core disciplines in the center after DecodeHR, digital HR right in the middle, surrounded by another ring showing enhanced HR, followed by third ring, which is around analytics. And you could look at this from inside out or outside in, depending on how entrenched your existing technology is. The fact of the matter is that there is HR technology in every area that you see here. The challenge is for us to actually recognize, how do we embark on this digital transformation? What are the choices that we should make, and how do we implement and execute in an agile manner so that you can see successful adoption of your HR technology? This is not just for fun. AR, VR is coming up, and you will see it in action. So in terms of what to expect for the webinar today, this is just a brief outline of what we will be covering. Over the next 50 minutes or so, there will be an interview session of sorts with Gideon and Q&A. But before that, we'll share some key concepts of Agile HR. We will jump into a bit of case study, and we'll talk about how you can start embedding Agile thinking into your people processes so that you can translate those key features into the capabilities that you need for your HR technology. This is to give you an overview of how Agile plays a part in terms of cultivating and sustaining Agile HR mindset. We will focus on the first two steps, embracing Agile mindset and embedding that across HR disciplines, and being able to translate that, as I mentioned, into features and functionalities of HR technology that will enable you to keep staying agile. The rest of the steps are important, and I would recommend that you continue to explore and think about how you can put together your digital transformation roadmap in a very integrated manner. And of course, when you start implementing, we would advocate an Agile HR approach, and we'll share a little bit more. So that was a quick photo, Gideon and I in New York, where I attended the Agile HR workshop. That was lots of fun. And here it captures essentially some of the key principles and practices of Agile. These are words that you will see over and over again, sort of like your standard Agile HR vocab. And some of you, I know, are already practicing Agile in your organizations. And some of these terminologies merely reflect the form. But today we want to focus on the substance as well of what it means to be truly Agile. This is the Agile HR Manifesto. And you will see that it will manifest itself across HR disciplines and processes in ways that are not exactly very overt, but you can see nuances of it: ambition over obligation, intrinsic motivation, and transparency, of course, where possible, and very importantly, collaborative networks. So this is where we are. Modern Agile, it has evolved, and there are 4 key principles that are easy to remember, but not always easy to practice. In an environment, as you can see, all the words in the white space there, in an environment that is increasingly complex, ambiguous, and evolving at a rapid rate because of technology, digitalization, and the choices of your workforce. And of course, new industries with fewer barriers to market, which does mean that we are operating in an environment that is highly complex and very challenging. So then, what does it mean for us in terms of these 4 principles? I won't go into too much detail, but suffice to say that as we start even practicing some of these today, there will be immediate benefits. Making people awesome, I think that's very clear in terms of how we can motivate people. Making safety a prerequisite, we're talking about psychological safety, the room for people to learn, to experiment, to make mistakes, to prototype. And of course, we have the rest, experiment and delivering value continuously. Anything you want to jump in at this point, Gideon?
No, I think, modern Agile really is a broad and great framework that kind of applies to a lot of Agile practices, whether it be in HR or outside of HR. And I think definitely that, making safety prerequisite, for example, is such a foundational principle, especially when it applies to teams, including HR teams, that I think has kind of been undervalued sometimes, but potentially can really make a difference.
Great. Okay. And actually, we're going on to the next quick case study. We're going to look at Bosch here. Bosch is a very interesting one because we know that they were an early adopter of Agile, and they have actually made it very, very pervasive across your organization. And they really made an effort to bring it into HR as well. Let's look at what they did. As a result of having to respond to rapidly changing consumer behaviors, and in order to deliver rapidly, so speed is the buzzword here, in the words of the Senior VP of Global HR, she said they needed to act like 21,000 startups, which sounds crazy. But if you read about some of the success stories of organizations that had to transition from a very traditional setup and structure to a more agile one, that's really what they had to do. So one thing about agile organizations, it appears, is that hierarchy is something that is not important and it's not a key feature. They try to actually do away with the hierarchy. So you see flatter teams for sure. And we know that Gideon has had experience of working with some of the Bosch folks in the Netherlands. So feel free to jump in and share, because we know that the journey to being agile is not always an easy one, particularly for HR with such traditional processes in place.
Yeah, I think what is very interesting here is that this is a movement that's been going on for a while, but that was really embraced by the top executive level of Bosch. And even if you do a quick search on YouTube, you will find some speeches about it by their top boss called Volkmar Denner. And he and his executive team has said, maybe we as an executive team should be an agile team as well. So for even at that level, it feels like they're running a startup. And the fun thing is that it has boiled down to a lot of HR processes as well. So that is why we are assisting Bosch in the Netherlands as well on their HR side, which is where it has its effect in that respect. So it's very interesting to see it move up and down and across the full organization.
Great. And they actually also put in place a HR lab within Bosch to really make this official, I suppose, that Bosch is really going agile and they're sending all the right signals. So even the way they are recruiting over here, you can see, love the word competencies, because I think that's how you can hire effectively, accurately, and even more rapidly by focusing on competencies and how they work with the management. So Gideon, we know that in teams that focus on Agile, the way they recruit is such that they put together multidisciplinary teams from across organizations, and then they have sort of like a leader who would sort of take turns to really prioritize the recruiting needs of the organization and to drive effective recruiting. Do you feel that that actually can be very effective versus a traditional recruitment function within your organization?
Yeah, so I think with regards to Agile, there are very interesting developments there when you're talking about recruitment. And one of them, for example, is more peer-to-peer recruitment. So if you're a flatter organization or there's less hierarchy, there's a bigger role for fellow team members to recruit new team members. So that is definitely something we see going on. And secondly, in very big organizations like Bosch, they are using more HR technology, including AI, to select those competencies and experience profiles that you need to kind of complement your Agile team with. So both in the tech space and in the more traditional recruitment space, you see a big change there.
Great, you beat me to it about the AI part. We'll get to that. We will be actually featuring some of the most progressive HR technologies out there today, and we will share some of them. So the other way they have actually managed some of their people processes is that they have actually augmented the performance management process. And that really puts the emphasis on the contribution of the individual in a team setting and how well they collaborate and so on and so forth. So it's not just about, did I meet this particular KPI? And in our extensive research, we have found that it actually does seem to bring out the best in people in terms of being very motivated, in terms of actually being accountable and really going above and beyond, their fixed job descriptions. I guess that's the reason why job descriptions as a sort of like a super lengthy document is something that is not common in Agile organizations, that there is actually a lot of autonomy, and people feel that they can own the role and they can work with people across the organization, which is why this concept of networks in an organization is going to be so key. And in Bosch, actually, they have gone quite advanced, I would say, in terms of the Agile HR concepts, because teams can actually even talk about setting their compensation budget, which is, to me, really quite mind-blowing. So I'm not sure if that's is something we will see anytime soon here in Asia. Let's see.
Yeah, and one of the things to add to that is that as they move away from fixed job descriptions, you see job level architectures and job structures becoming simplified. Mm-hmm. And what you see is that there's more emphasis on role descriptions. So role descriptions are more fluid, and basically you see hierarchies move from a fixed job level architecture to a role architecture, which is more flexible and which allows people to actually take on multiple roles at the same time. So that's a big development there.
Yeah, and that's the way with the career paths as well, right? It's no longer linear and vertical. It's a lot more, I would say, exciting. There are a lot more options for the workforce. And of course, that really helps with engagement as well. So this is in a very simple way, presenting how an organization that is very traditional would have a very hierarchical structure. They would have very defined processes and perhaps systems that are very different and don't speak to one another. And they really just look at goals maybe twice a year, and goals are cascaded down. So everything is actually more top down. Compared to an agile organization structure where you can see that the people processes, which we will look at a little bit more, a lot more agile, and technology as well, actually is attached to the way the people processes are designed, right? And there are the frequent check-ins and so on. So we'll just go a bit more into looking at that. So at the end of the day, isn't it about having the right culture? And it's not so much of the form, right? Is it possible that, an organization that is doing the daily things right, you're having your daily stand-ups, you've got your teams, your tribes, you have got all your right processes in place. Is it possible that you might not have actually sort of internalized the Agile DNA? Do you have any thoughts about that, Gideon?
Yeah, so in the agile world, often we talk about mindset as a very important thing. And what is very hard about that, it's hard to grasp. So sometimes there are certain processes or agile ways of working which you simply have to introduce in order to be able to understand that mindset. But yeah, what we've seen from experience is, for that culture to come into fruition, it might actually take years. So it's not a very short-term process. It's something that needs a considerable amount of time and attention to start building it, which doesn't mean that you can start today or tomorrow. It just means that you have to play the long game.
Agree. We are going to spend the next couple of slides looking at some of the people processes in HR today. Would love to go into all the areas, but in the interest of time, we will only focus on a few. So we're going to zoom in on competency management, which we know is very critical in terms of putting in the building blocks. And we know in today's environment, it really is essential to have scenario planning, to really scan the market, to very quickly identify critical competencies that are needed in some instances for the organization to look at how it can deliver services tomorrow, right? Because things are changing so rapidly. So some of these really core or critical agile processes include even like workforce management, workforce assessment. And again, you mentioned about job descriptions and what does it mean in terms of people's ability to start adopting new competencies. I think that's an implication for learning and development, which we won't go into. The other area is about talent acquisition. We've heard so much about speed, right? Speed to talent. But there's only so much an organization can do. So again, the focus is what are your most critical roles, which is why I think it's great that a multidisciplinary team is actually involved in saying that, yeah, we weigh in on it and we think, yes, these are the critical roles that we should focus on. And of course, the cultural fit, because as an organization starts to go agile, they need to make sure they are hiring people with the propensity for that sort of environment. So we won't go too much into that. Next one is really on total rewards. We have noticed a shift from traditional compensation, benefits, structures and programs. And I think one of the catalysts for this is perhaps partially due to the pandemic, where organizations realized that there were skills that they needed today, but they actually don't have it. So one of the ways some organizations are starting to encourage and motivate their employees to really upskill and reskill is actually looking at skill-based rewards program, which in my mind seems to make sense if that's the emphasis that we want to place. I know that's going to be a very big shift, because when we talk about moving away from traditional programs, it's hard for managers, it's hard for senior leaders sometimes to wrap their heads around that. If there's anything that you want to share about this point, feel free to jump in, Gideon, about this, the way that is evolving today.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in the rewards category, there's actually books being written about that. There's a Dutch professor named Gidion Peters who has extensively written about this in agile organizations. And one of the things about rewards is that right now there is a single point for making decisions often, which is the manager to decide on certain rewards. And you see that moving towards the team level as well. So there's actually more team responsibility in adjudicating these rewards and well, making them more flexible in a way. So yeah, there's a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah,
I think it actually deserves its own webinar.
I agree. So it's really talking about rewarding behaviors that help teams to succeed, right? So about team collaboration, team outcomes, and being accountable for team goals.
Yeah, and actually also separating the rewards process from the traditional performance process. So performance should really be about helping people grow, while rewards usually are separated from that in agile organizations. So yeah, that's an important aspect to consider.
Yeah, we see that, and I think companies are trying to make that a very distinct part, you know, so two separate processes. Yeah. We'll move on. Thank you. Performance management, we spoke about it actually. So again, you know, increasing the cadence of check-ins and peer feedback, like you mentioned, is something that is going to be very valuable as well. And of course, many organizations are moving to the concept of OKRs, so that it's something that you look at in real time and not twice a year, once a year, in terms of KPIs, which are very different. And we are hearing from the market in our conversations with people that this is an urgent need. Organizations are looking into how they can redesign their performance management processes today. So I think this is going to be very critical. And the other organization that went agile is Intuit. And it seems it wasn't the easiest journey for them. Like you mentioned, it's not an overnight thing. A lot of perseverance needed. So he or she has some tips for us here. Focusing on early adopters, form SST, small, stable, self-managed teams, quickly train leaders at all levels in agile methods, and making sure that people get used to the idea of servant leadership, which is very interesting. And I suppose the servant leadership part is about coaching and supporting people, right? Rather than just delegating, expecting results. I think that is a very clear difference in terms of the style. I think the other piece, if I may add to this, that is very important, is to start demonstrating results early on, to demonstrate to the organization that the Agile can actually bring in benefits that are tangible. I think that's very critical. If you have anything to add, just let us know. Now I'll move on. So this piece is about, as you look into implementing, designing or really going agile in terms of your HR transformation. So it's good to think about the kind of teams that you will form to drive the execution. And oftentimes in HR, it may be just the HR team. And I know Gideon will share a little bit with us, but there is wisdom in involving stakeholders that have vested interests. They may not be from HR. So it's very interesting to look at that thinking in order to actually make people awesome, right? At the end of the day, it's about making people awesome so they can succeed. So giving people a share, in terms of the creation, co-creating. We spoke about safety, psychological safety. Based on our experience in what we have observed, we have noticed that sometimes this piece is not in place when it comes to digital transformation. And it can be a huge obstacle in terms of affecting adoption because people are afraid. There is fear that if I do not adopt, or if I'm not successful in the adoption, I do not have a place in this organization, or I might be seen as being irrelevant. So this piece keeps coming up, psychological safety, which I feel leaders have a very big role to play in terms of implementing such huge change initiatives. So any point to add to that, Gideon, if not, we'll move on.
No, I think, well, especially the stability part for me is very closely tied up with safety. So in order to create that environment, it's great for teams to build that level of trust, and that simply takes time. And of course, protection and enablement by leadership.
So again, the challenge, I suppose, for us is how can we adopt Agile HR mindset to make the HR team an awesome one. So I think that really is the opportunity, I would say, a very real opportunity for HR teams today. And I guess the thing that I would like to add is that Agile leadership is going to be such critical component, right, of this entire transformation. Without Agile leadership, I really doubt if any of the change initiatives can succeed. So that's something that's very close to my heart. Okay, we'll look at a few stats here. This is taken from HBR, and what they have done was they polled software developers who are huge Agile advocates, and they shared the challenges that they face in scaling Agile in their respective organizations. So if you look at top challenges here, I ask that you take a moment, just look at that. And if you look at the next slide, where Organize Agile and Gidion's team, they actually polled HR leaders. And this is what they identified as key threats to Agile HR. And I think we can see many parallels between the two slides in terms of key challenges and threats. But on a good note, it's great to see what are the success factors for embracing Agile HR. And clearly, autonomy is something that stands out, right? I can see. And the other piece is psychologically safe environment, which is what we spoke about just now. Yeah. Okay, and it's poll time. I'm going to run a very quick poll. Hope everybody's ready. Okay, the question is, are you planning to embark on a digital HR transformation journey? I suspect many organizations have actually embarked on it, but are actually enhancing and adding the capability to their organization. And for those that are new and are in the midst of it, I suppose they would have taken the first few steps. Okay, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to share the results. So it seems most organizations are embarking on digital HR transformation in the next 3 months. This is from 59% thereabouts of the attendees here. Thank you. Move on. This is where we will feature some of our HR tech partners. First one here is Zopa. So Zopa is an ATS, applicant tracking system, with extremely well-developed capabilities, and Zopa Room is one of their newest products. As you can see, it's AI-enabled on-demand video interviewing platform. And they have a room for employers where everything can be actually pre-configured ahead of time. And then you have the room for candidates. And I suppose this works well, particularly in what we call the rise of the contact-free economy or low-touch economy. So you can actually do virtual recruiting effectively and enabled by technology. The other company that I'd like to share about, sorry, we're still talking about the analytics that's available through Zopa Room. So the analytics piece is very important here. AI enabled as well. There's lots of good stuff. We'll be happy to share more. The other organization is People First. People First has just launched People First Connect, which is a new product, a new module to add to their full suite of HR products. And it's about helping employees to stay connected, to collaborate, and to really be motivated, be informed as well. And they have their mobile app as well. So this is something that can be overlaid over the existing HRMS or not independently as well. And the reason why we are sharing some of these organizations today is because we feel they do actually encourage organizations to continue with their agile HR thinking. So it epitomizes some of the really important principles. The other one is sum total. Sum total, we want to focus on their talent development suite here. And it talks about mobile learning. And what I like here is about the competencies piece, really connecting skills and competencies to the focus of development. And last but not least, we will talk about Panelid. Panelid focuses on people data analytics. And it's great because it actually covers the entire employee life cycle, from looking at attrition to organization network analysis that shows how well employees are connected to one another across the organization. Again, very important when it comes to collaborating and really being agile as an organization. And we will stop here. That's it. I completed my deck. So over to you, Gideon.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, a little more insight here on the concept of Agile HR and especially the organizational side of this. Evelyn just showed a number of technologies which can obviously be adopted by HR. The question now is, how do you structure yourself? How do you implement a certain way of working that can actually make Agile HR work for you? So in order to do that, I'll jump in a little into the concept of Agile HR, and then we'll move on to a case, actually a couple of cases of how organizations have adopted this through structuring themselves in an intelligent way. So without further ado, let's take this example. And this is a metaphor I really like when describing the world of Agile. And this is an example of a big package delivery organization. And their corporate organizations is very much like this, right? So it's a big, slow frigate, a big boat, and it is very efficient, though at the same time, not as easy to steer and adjust. And what you see then is that these digital teams start arising, right? So they actually apply and adopt Agile principles, which have been there for a long time already. And you see them kind of pulling at the mothership, accelerating certain processes, and being more agile in themselves. Now, from there, we have now come to this third wave of actual teams, agile teams springing up all across the organization, not just in digital, those multidisciplinary teams which Evelyn talked about, which are fast, which are able to respond to market changes, and which in some ways are much faster than the mothership itself. So the challenge then becomes, how can we use that small speedboat thinking and inspire those in the big organization with it? Now, that doesn't mean, and I saw a great question in the Q&A, that Agile principles cannot be used by small organizations. I would even say that smaller organizations are already used in a lot of ways to that speedboat thinking. The question is for them, how do we find a disciplined approach to actually implement that and to maintain the benefits of being in that speedboat? Now, the HR department itself has to face this new reality, right? So there's the potential of these agile teams moving fast and rapidly and adjusting to change. But what can HR itself do about that? Now, the big benefit that HR organizations that we work with have been very adamant about is the benefit of being able to respond faster to business demand, right? So in many ways, of course, HR is about being a great partner for the business in developing talent and making sure that the people factor of the organization is optimal. And being able to be a better partner is definitely something we see in this space. There's a great quote here, by the way, from Isabel, who we work with in San Francisco, in California. And she headed this HR tech department that was basically saying, we are being overstuffed. There's too much of these HR technology projects coming towards us. And by embracing Agile, we actually have now a more disciplined approach towards accepting work and doing the right things for the business. So contrary to a lot of, let's say, prejudice that is out there in the market, Agile is not about randomly doing what is best at that moment, but actually having a disciplined approach to executing on projects and activities, including HR technology adoption. Now, for Agile HR itself, there's basically 4 levels you can play on. And one of them is the organizational level. Some organizations have huge ambitions like Bosch, and then HR really is there as a partner to help accelerate that. There's the instruments, which Evelyn also talked about, right? So performance management and rewards. And very importantly, there's the departmental level. So how can you as a department start embracing these principles to be able to be that supporter of Agile change within the organization? Now, how does that work in practice? Well, I will show you an example from our consultancy practice after this short bit of theory. So one of the things we often see is that HR organizations start running from project to project. And often when we start engaging them, we see that their backlog, so to say, projects is overstuffed. There's too many things running at the same time. Often because business stakeholders have high demands. You know, there are CEOs coming in, there are other business stakeholders coming in. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. And sometimes that kind of leads to a traffic jam within HR. And some thinking that is now springing up in the Agile world is, you know, how can we stop this project type of thinking in which we're always stopping and starting projects and move towards a more continuous flow of value. Now that might sound pretty abstract, but in reality it means that you follow the flow of value of the employee. If you're an HR department, the employee and its journey through your organization becomes the flow of value, and making sure that you can service them at the right point with the right product then becomes the bigger focus. Now, this is a more traditional way to structure it, right? So you actually accept those projects with separate project teams. There is a certain operational part to HR, but the fundamental principle behind that is that we're trying to find people all the time to work on certain projects. And the more agile structured way to do this is to say, hey, you know, we have teams that are dedicated to a certain part of the flow value of the employee journey. And we make sure that those people that are servicing those employees do not only work on certain chunks of work, right? So work on what we would have called projects, but also service those same employees, right? So we get to these teams that we call DevOps teams, in which development and operations are then integrated. So this is a whole new world, actually. And I'm seeing it being implemented in more and more Agile organizations.